Racist cop laughs when black man applies for police job. Forced to salute when he becomes his captain. Welcome, listeners, to a story that delves beneath the surface of ambition and success, exploring the deep scars left by prejudice and the extraordinary strength of the human will to overcome. This is a narrative about how justice is sometimes found not through force or authority, but through the quiet persistence in the face of injustice, and perhaps through the power of forgiveness. Have you ever stopped to consider what happens when the very institution sworn to protect and serve becomes the source of your deepest humiliation? What occurs when your most earnest aspirations are crushed, not by a lack of capability, but by the color of your skin and the blatant contempt of those wearing the very badge you revere? And just maybe one day, the individuals who mocked your dreams will be forced to look upon you with an entirely different gaze. Let us begin our tale on a stifling August morning in the city of Atlanta, in the year 2005. What happens when the very place you placed your complete faith and hope to contribute to becomes the place that deals you the most brutal blow? What happens when your noble dream is extinguished not by a lack of ability, but by your skin color and the contempt of those who wear the very emblem you hold in reverence? Can justice truly exist where prejudice still lingers? And will, one day, those who once ridiculed you be forced to look up at you with an entirely different perspective? Let us peel back the layers, piece by piece, of Jamal Carter's life to find the answers. It was a hot, heavy August day, the air thick with humidity and the nervous energy of anticipation. Jamal Carter, a young man of 21 years, pushed open the glass doors of the Atlanta Police Department headquarters. He wore a crisp white shirt, neatly tied necktie, his hair recently cut short and tidy. In his hands, he clutched a slim portfolio containing his job application. His steps were perhaps a little hesitant, the natural nerves of a job interview, but his eyes were bright with genuine hope. He had just graduated from college with a degree in criminal justice, a field he had chosen with purpose, fueled by a genuine desire to wear that badge, to stand on the side of justice, to serve his community. He had prepared for this moment throughout his university years, studying the law, understanding the challenges, envisioning himself as part of the solution. He was directed to meet Lieutenant Rick Harlan, a white man in his late 40s or early 50s, whose posture seemed burdened by years of weariness and whose gaze held a distinct, cold detachment. Harlan sat behind a cluttered desk, the surface piled high with files and paperwork. His eyes flicked up as Jamal approached, a quick, dismissive glance that seemed to size him up and discard him in an instant, before settling back on the papers on his desk. Jamal walked the length of the office, feeling the weight of the institution around him, the history etched into the walls, the silent presence of other officers at their desks. Harlan spoke without looking up, his voice gruff and impatient, as if Jamal were an inconvenience. Harlan, gruff, uninterested tone put it down. Jamal carefully placed his portfolio on the edge of Harlan's desk. He stood up straight, trying to project confidence, trying to appear as the capable, hopeful candidate he was. Jamal. Excuse me, Lieutenant. My name is Jamal Carter. I'm here to apply for a position with the force. I've just graduated from college. Harlan cut him off mid-sentence. The lieutenant finally picked up the portfolio, but his handling of it was cursory, almost contemptuous. He flipped through a few pages, barely glancing at the carefully prepared resume, the academic transcripts, the letters of recommendation. As he reached the personal details page, his eyes landed on Jamal's photograph. A slow, unpleasant smirk began to spread across Harlan's face, deepening the lines around his mouth. His eyes, as he looked up from the photo to Jamal, were filled with something cold and utterly dismissive, a look that went beyond evaluating qualifications and delved into something far more personal and ugly. Harlan, voice dripping with contempt, slightly louder now, enough for others nearby to overhear. College? Criminal justice degree? Ha ha ha. You think a guy like you is gonna get accepted here? You will never fit in with this badge, kid. Not ever. Harlan slapped the portfolio back onto the desk, shoving it towards Jamal as if it were something soiled or worthless. The sound was sharp in the quiet office. His laughter followed, a harsh, dry sound that held no humor, only derision. Jamal froze. He felt the blood drain from his face, then rush back, hot and stinging. It wasn't the rejection itself that paralyzed him. He had mentally prepared for the possibility of not getting the job, of facing competition. But the laughter, and that look, Harlan's eyes, and the eyes of the other officers sitting around them, they weren't all actively laughing, but many were smirking, their gazes cold or amused. They were looking at him as if he were a foolish child, a punchline. The very people who wore the uniform he admired, the uniform that symbolized protection and justice, were looking at him with that kind of disdain. A knot formed in Jamal's throat, making it hard to breathe. He felt a surge of shame, followed almost immediately by a fierce, burning anger. He had to say something. He couldn't just walk away with that laughter ringing in his ears. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his voice, though he could feel it trembling slightly. He met Harlan's gaze directly, his own eyes moments ago filled with hope, now hardened by a sudden, raw determination. Jamal, voice trembling but eyes fixed and resolute, I will be back. And the next time, you will have to call me Captain. The words hung in the air, a stark contrast to the mocking laughter that had preceded them. He picked up his portfolio, his hands shaking slightly, and turned away from the desk, from Harlan, from the smirking faces of the other officers. He walked towards the exit, the sound of their lingering laughter echoing behind him, each step a painful reminder of the humiliation, but also a firm stride towards the future he had just vowed to create. That brutal rejection wasn't the last. Jamal applied to other police departments in the region, receiving more rejections, encountering more hesitant looks, or simply cold indifference. The doors of traditional law enforcement seemed firmly shut against him. But Jamal Carter refused to be broken. Instead of continuing to batter against a wall that wouldn't yield, he chose a different path, a detour. He joined a private security firm, where he honed his skills in observation, protection, and tactical response. He then transitioned into an intelligence role with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. Here, his skin color, his background, these things mattered less than his capability and his results. And Jamal proved himself to be exceptionally capable. He quickly gained a reputation for his sharp mind and dedication, making significant contributions to investigations. His work was instrumental in dismantling a major federal human trafficking ring, a success that earned him recognition and saw his name featured in newspaper articles. Plot point 1 was activated. One door had slammed shut in his face, but another, perhaps even more significant, had opened wide, driven by his unwavering resolve forged in the fires of that first, painful rejection. Time, that relentless sculptor of destiny, marched onward. 7 years had passed since that suffocating August morning. 7 years filled with unseen struggles, quiet victories, relentless effort, and the forging of a man defined not by the doors slammed in his face, but by the windows he pried open and the new paths he blazed. Jamal Carter was no longer the raw, hopeful college graduate. He was a seasoned professional, his gaze sharp, his demeanor calm, carrying the quiet authority earned through proven competence and unwavering integrity. The world had tested him, and he had met the test, emerging stronger, more focused. In 2012, destiny, with its often ironic sense of humor, brought Jamal back to Atlanta. Not as a supplicant, portfolio in hand, but as an expert. He returned as an officer of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, assigned to assist local police departments. His mission: to provide advanced training in investigative techniques and, pointedly, in addressing and mitigating racial bias within law enforcement, a persistent, festering issue in the city. He stepped back into the very building where his dream had been met with laughter, now wearing a different, equally respected badge, armed with knowledge and experience the local force needed. 7 years later, the young man who had been dismissed with a cruel laugh was back. He stood before a room full of Atlanta police officers, not asking for a chance, but here to impart knowledge, to guide. It was a striking tableau: the rejected applicant, now in a position of authority and expertise, addressing the very force that had once scorned him. As Jamal began his presentation, outlining the objectives of the training program, his eyes scanned the faces in the audience, a professional courtesy. And then his gaze paused. Sitting midway back, looking older, perhaps more tired, certainly carrying the weight of years and a visible air of dissatisfaction, was Lieutenant Rick Harlan. The years had added lines to Harlan's face, deepened the furrows in his brow, but the fundamental expression, a cynical weariness bordering on bitterness, remained. Harlan clearly recognized Jamal. A flicker of surprise, sharp and involuntary, crossed the lieutenant's face for just a fraction of a second. It was immediately masked by that familiar scowl, but Jamal saw it. He acknowledged the recognition with only the slightest, almost imperceptible dip of his head, his expression remaining perfectly composed and professional as he continued his presentation on behavioral analysis and de-escalation techniques. The rest of the training session passed without incident, Jamal commanding the room with quiet confidence, answering questions with precision and patience. Harlan sat mostly in silence, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes fixed on Jamal, but his expression unreadable, a mixture, perhaps, of resentment, reluctant curiosity, and grudging respect for the man standing before him. When the training session concluded, several officers approached Jamal to shake his hand, thank him, ask follow-up questions. Harlan remained seated for a few moments, then slowly rose, standing apart from the small crowd gathered around Jamal. He watched from a distance, his stance rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. As the group around Jamal began to disperse, Harlan deliberately walked towards him. The air around them seemed to thicken, carrying an invisible tension that only the two men could truly feel, a residue of that painful encounter years ago. Harlan stopped a few feet away, his posture defensive, his eyes still holding that challenging, slightly mocking glint. Harlan, voice carefully neutral, but with an edge of sarcasm, well, look at you, Agent Carter. The FBI man is here to show us how it's done now. I suppose those college books taught you everything, huh? Jamal turned to face Harlan fully. He offered a small, composed smile. It wasn't a smile of victory or gloating. It was simply the calm, confident expression of a man secure in his present, acknowledging the past without being defined by it. He remembered Harlan's laugh, the cold eyes, the dismissive shove of the portfolio. Those memories were sharp, but they no longer had the power to wound him. They were simply facts of his history. Jamal, voice even professional, yet carrying a quiet strength. Lieutenant Harlan. It is good to see you again. I'm not here to show anyone how it's done. I'm here to share knowledge, to collaborate, to help everyone do their job effectively, and to ensure we serve the community without eroding their trust. Jamal's last words hung in the air. Without eroding their trust. It was a direct yet subtle reference to the very issues the training aimed to address, issues that people like Harlan, with their ingrained biases, had contributed to. Harlan, his face hardening slightly, jaw tightening. Right. Collaborate. Suppose you know all about trust being out there. He gestured vaguely with his head, indicating Jamal's time away from the local force. His time as a black man navigating a world that hadn't always trusted him, even within law enforcement. The jab was clear. Jamal, his smile remains, but his eyes are serious. I know the importance of earning it, Lieutenant. Every single day, just like we all should. Harlan held his gaze for another moment, the sarcasm fading, replaced by a flicker of something unreadable. Perhaps a hint of shame, quickly suppressed, or simply frustration. He gave a short, curt nod. Harlan, right? Well, hope this training is useful. He turned abruptly and walked away, his back stiff, his shoulders tight. Jamal watched him go. The brief exchange had confirmed what he already knew. The scar left by that first encounter was still tender for both of them, though in vastly different ways. For Harlan, it was a raw, humiliating reminder of a past act of prejudice and the unexpected, irrefutable rise of the man he had attempted to crush. Jamal's calm confidence, his achieved position, was a living, breathing rebuke to Harlan's judgment. It was evident that the lieutenant's deep-seated biases and resentments hadn't magically disappeared. They had merely festered, made worse by the bitter taste of seeing the man he'd dismissed now standing above him, even if only temporarily for a training exercise. For Jamal, the encounter was a quiet validation, a moment that underscored how far he had come, not just in rank or career, but in inner strength. He had faced the source of his initial pain not with anger, but with composed professionalism, demonstrating that his focus was not on settling scores, but on the mission improving the force, serving the public. This meeting wasn't just a reunion. It was a subtle, yet powerful, shift in the dynamic they shared, laying the groundwork for the even greater reversal yet to come. 6 more years rolled by. The city of Atlanta was rocked by a major corruption scandal within its police department. Betrayal of public trust, misconduct, ethical breaches. The headlines were damning. The reputation of the force plummeted. It was clear that cosmetic changes wouldn't suffice. A fundamental overhaul was needed. A leader from outside, untainted by the internal politics and corruption. Someone with the authority and vision to clean house and rebuild from the ground up. And the name that emerged, vetted and approved, was that of the accomplished FBI officer who had already worked quietly with the department years before. Time, as it often does in the grand narrative, brought dramatic shifts. A scandal tore through the Atlanta Police Department, exposing rot at its core and shattering public confidence. The need for reform was undeniable, urgent. And the individual chosen to lead this daunting task was the man who had once been told he didn't belong. In 2018, Jamal Carter returned to the Atlanta Police Department in a new capacity, not as a guest trainer, but as a permanent fixture, holding significant authority. Initially brought in as a deputy director overseeing reform, his role quickly solidified, granting him power to make sweeping changes. Corrupt officers were purged, ineffective procedures were dismantled, and those resistant to change were reassigned. Rick Harlan, due to his history of questionable conduct and his general attitude, became one of the officers affected by the restructuring. He was stripped of his lieutenant rank and sent back to patrol duty, the most basic level of police work, under the direct purview and supervision of the new leadership. The irony was palpable, thick in the air of the precinct houses. It was a mandatory Monday morning briefing. The atmosphere in the large briefing room was heavy, a mixture of apprehension, resentment, and nervous anticipation. Everyone knew the new leadership was tightening its grip, and today, the man appointed to a prominent command position, the one everyone had heard rumors about, the outsider brought in to shake things up, would be formally addressing the entire force. Rick Harlan sat near the back, slumped slightly in his chair, his face grim. The demotion had been a bitter pill to swallow. The return to basic patrol after years in a supervisory role was a constant, grating humiliation. And the knowledge that his fate, his daily assignments, his very future within the department, now rested, in part, in the hands of the man he'd mocked, was a special kind of torture. He avoided eye contact with everyone, feeling exposed and defeated. The main door to the briefing room opened. All heads turned. A figure entered, tall and composed, carrying himself with an air of quiet authority. He wore a perfectly tailored police uniform, sharp and new. On his collar, the insignia glinted the bars of a captain. A collective hush fell over the room. It was Jamal Carter. Now Captain Jamal Carter. Captain Carter walked to the front of the room, his stride steady, his expression serious yet calm. He reached the podium and paused, his gaze sweeping over the assembled officers. His eyes passed over Harlan, then returned, a brief, acknowledging glance, devoid of triumph or malice, simply recognizing his presence. The chief of police, standing beside Jamal, stepped forward to make a brief introduction. Chief of Police, gentlemen, ladies, allow me to introduce Captain Jamal Carter, who will be overseeing significant operational reforms and taking command of the chief paused, then addressed the room with a clear, strong voice. Chief of Police, everyone, please stand and greet your new captain. Chairs scraped back as the entire room rose to their feet. Harlan stood slowly, stiffly, his face paling visibly. He had to do it. He had to stand for him. The man he'd told didn't belong here 13 years ago. The man he'd laughed at. Now he had to stand for him as his superior. Captain Carter stood at the podium, waiting, his posture relaxed but alert. The chief, perhaps with a touch of deliberate emphasis, added, Chief of Police, Officer Harlan, would you like to offer a specific welcome to Captain Carter? Harlan froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He felt the eyes of everyone in the room on him. The weight of the moment was crushing. He clenched his fists at his sides, then slowly released them. He took a deep, shaky breath. He looked up, his eyes meeting Jamal's across the room. The contempt was gone, replaced by a complex mixture of bitterness, shame, and grudging acknowledgement. His voice was tight, strained, but he forced the words out, loud enough for everyone to hear in the hushed room. Harlan, voice tight, strained, a clear effort. Good morning, Captain. The words were heavy, pulled from him with immense difficulty, a stark admission of the reversal of their fortunes. Jamal nodded slightly, his expression unwavering, still devoid of any hint of gloating. He simply acknowledged the greeting with quiet dignity. Jamal, thank you, Officer Harlan. Please, everyone, be seated. The officers sat down, the sound of chairs echoing the release of tension, though the air remained charged. Captain Carter began his address, speaking of accountability, community partnerships, and a renewed commitment to justice. But for every person in that room, the defining moment had already occurred the moment Rick Harlan, the symbol of the old guard's prejudice, was forced to acknowledge the authority of the man he had once mocked as a guy like you. It was a moment steeped in power, yet that power wasn't wielded as vengeance. Jamal had not retaliated, had not humiliated Harlan in return. He simply occupied the position his competence, resilience, and integrity had earned him. His calm acceptance of Harlan's strained greeting, his lack of triumphalism, spoke volumes. His words, spoken later in his address, about the opportunity for a fresh start and not wasting it, resonated specifically with Harlan, and generally with everyone present who had witnessed the exchange. It was a powerful, silent lesson about the consequences of prejudice, the unpredictable turns of life, and the quiet strength found not in tearing others down, but in building oneself up. Rick Harlan had received a lesson far more potent and humiliating than any verbal reprimand could have been, the irrefutable proof that the man he dismissed had not only succeeded, but had risen to become his commander. This moment solidified the dramatic role reversal and set the stage for the complex, forced interaction that would come next. 2 years had passed since Captain Jamal Carter took the helm, steering the Atlanta Police Department towards reform and renewed integrity. Public confidence was slowly mending, and the stain of the past scandal was gradually fading under his transparent and ethical leadership. Yet, the roots of corruption are often deep, and the criminal element they once enabled was not entirely eradicated. A dangerous drug trafficking organization, rumored to have deep ties to some of the dismissed officers from the old regime, began to consolidate power, operating with a cunning born of insider knowledge. This wasn't just a fight against crime. It was a battle against the lingering shadow of the past the department was trying to overcome. Captain Carter knew he needed to confront this threat head-on, but he also knew this particular enemy required more than just standard procedure. In 2020, the city faced a renewed threat. A sophisticated drug network, leveraging old connections and knowledge of police procedures, was operating with impunity. Captain Carter was tasked with leading the multi-agency investigation. He quickly realized that the key to dismantling this particular organization lay not just in current intelligence, but in understanding the specific weaknesses, hideouts, and methods known only to those who had once been part of the department's darker side. He needed someone who possessed this intimate, perhaps unsavory, knowledge. Someone who had been there, seen it, understood the twisted logic of the old guard. The answer, both unsettling and necessary, lay with Officer Rick Harlan. Despite his demotion and past prejudices, Harlan had spent decades on the streets, had seen the underbelly of the city, and knew the players from the time when corruption was more rampant. He had knowledge Jamal needed, knowledge Harlan probably never thought would be valuable to the man who had superseded him. The drug gang was more than just a criminal enterprise. It felt like a manifestation of the very rot Captain Carter had been brought in to excise. They were bold, seemingly one step ahead, suggesting access to privileged information or at least a deep understanding of police tactics. Jamal pored over intelligence reports, flowcharts, and surveillance data, but a piece of the puzzle was missing. He needed context, the unofficial history, the gut feelings of someone who had navigated those murky waters for years. He made a decision that surprised some of his team, a decision born purely out of strategic necessity. He summoned Officer Rick Harlan to the command center. Harlan arrived, dressed in his patrol uniform, looking apprehensive. He hadn't been in this part of the building, among the leadership and strategic planners, since his demotion. Jamal met Harlan in a small, private office off the main command center. The room was sparse, dominated by a large tactical map on the wall. Jamal was standing, pointing to various points on the map when Harlan entered. Harlan stood just inside the door, his posture uncertain, his eyes darting between Jamal and the map. Jamal, voice serious, businesslike, no hint of personal history. Officer Harlan. Thank you for coming. Please sit down. Harlan hesitated for a moment, then walked slowly to the offered chair and sat. He clasped his hands tightly in his lap. Harlan, voice cautious. Captain, you needed to see me? Is there something wrong? Jamal. There is something wrong, officer. A major drug operation. They're sophisticated, connected. We think they have links to some of the individuals involved in the department's past issues. Jamal turned from the map to face Harlan directly. His expression was focused, professional, but his eyes held a steady, unwavering look that demanded honesty. Jamal, I need your knowledge, officer. You were here a long time. You saw how things worked. You knew people both inside and outside the department that I never will. I believe you know things about the way these networks operate, things they wouldn't put in any report, things that could give us the edge we need. Harlan looked down at his hands. The request was unexpected. It wasn't about his past failures or attitudes. It was about his experience. He felt a complex mix of resentment that this man was asking him for help after everything, and a strange flicker of something akin to relevance. Harlan, voice low, hesitant. I knew some things, saw some things. The streets, they talk, but they don't always make sense on paper. Jamal, that's why I need you. I need the things that don't make sense on paper. The hunches, the unconfirmed whispers, the places you avoided, the names that came up in unexpected contexts. For the next hour, they talked. Tentatively at first, Harlan offered fragments, observations from years ago, names he hadn't thought about in ages. Jamal listened intently, asking probing questions, piecing together the fragmented information with the current intelligence. The initial tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a shared focus on the task at hand. Harlan found himself speaking more freely, drawn in by Jamal's respectful attention and clear competence. He watched Jamal work, the sharp analytical mind, the calm decision-making, the way he valued information no matter where it came from. He saw the leader Jamal was, the leader he himself had never managed to be, held back by his own limitations and prejudices. A grudging respect began to form, then a reluctant sense of being part of something important again. He realized Jamal wasn't using him. He was utilizing a resource that happened to be him. Their collaboration continued over several days. Harlan provided key insights into potential dead drops used by the gang, understanding of their hierarchy based on old connections, and warnings about certain individuals known for extreme violence. The information, combined with FBI surveillance data, allowed the task force to build a comprehensive picture of the network. The time for the raid was set. The night of the raid. The air was thick with anticipation and the metallic tang of adrenaline. The task force moved in on the primary target location, a fortified warehouse complex on the edge of the city. Captain Carter was on the ground, leading from the front, his movements precise and controlled. Officer Harlan was with a support unit, positioned based on his knowledge of potential escape routes. The initial breach was successful, but the situation quickly devolved into chaos as the criminals reacted violently. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. Shouting, the crash of breaking glass, the sharp reports of weapons filled the air. Jamal and his team were clearing a section of the warehouse, moving systematically, when a hidden door burst open. A large, desperate figure, one of the gang's enforcers, lunged out, armed and dangerous. Jamal raised his weapon, but the criminal was fast, his eyes wide with panic, bringing his own gun up, pointed directly at Jamal. In that split second, time seemed to slow. Bang! The shot wasn't from the criminal. The enforcer crumpled to the ground. Rick Harlan stood in the smoky doorway of a connecting room, his service weapon extended. He had seen the danger, reacted instantly, his years of training overriding everything else. But as Harlan fired, another figure appeared behind him, a guard who had been hiding. The second criminal fired wildly. Harlan cried out, stumbling backward. He clutched his side, blood blooming quickly on his uniform. He sank to the floor, his gun clattering away. Jamal reacted instantly, securing the area with his team, ensuring the threats were neutralized. Then he rushed to Harlan's side, kneeling beside him on the cold concrete floor. Jamal? Officer Harlan. Rick, are you hit? Where? Harlan was struggling to breathe, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He pressed a hand to his side, his fingers coming away slick with blood. He looked up at Jamal, his eyes clouded with pain, but also something else or clarity. Harlan, voice weak, raspy, a struggle to speak got me, sighed, bad. He reached out a trembling hand, gripping Jamal's arm tightly. Harlan, I was wrong, Captain. About everything. About you. About color. About people. You were right. About everything that mattered. Tears welled in Harlan's eyes, tracing paths through the grime on his face. His grip on Jamal's arm tightened for a moment. Harlan, and I'm proud to call you Captain. His hand loosened, falling back to the floor. The sounds of the raid, shouting, sirens, radios seemed to fade into the background as Jamal looked down at the man who had once tried to break him, the man who had just saved his life, offering a confession and a sign of respect in what might be his final moments. Medics were rushing towards them, their voices urgent. Harlan's words were soft, barely audible above the sounds of the scene, but they resonated deeply with Jamal. It wasn't just a confession of past wrongs. It was an act of redemption, paid for with his own blood. In the heat of the battle, facing death, Rick Harlan's true character, perhaps buried for years under layers of prejudice and cynicism, had emerged. He had seen the man Jamal was, the leader, the embodiment of the ideals they were both sworn to uphold, and in that critical moment, instinct and respect had triumphed over ingrained bias. He had chosen to save the man he once despised, acknowledging his error and bestowing upon Jamal the very title he had once refused to believe Jamal could ever earn. This act, born from the crucible of shared danger, transformed their relationship irrevocably, a testament to the possibility of change, even when the cost is steep. Weeks turned into months. Officer Rick Harlan survived his injuries, though his recovery was long and arduous, leaving him with lasting physical limitations. The drug network was dismantled, its ties to the old corruption severed, a significant victory for Captain Carter and the city. Life moved forward, bringing both healing and consequences. The city of Atlanta, recognizing Captain Jamal Carter's exceptional leadership in reforming the police department and his pivotal role in the successful drug operation, organized a special ceremony at City Hall to present him with a commendation medal. The hall was filled with city officials, fellow police officers, and members of the community whose trust had been restored. Jamal stood on the podium, sharp in his dress uniform, accepting the award. He spoke with humility, acknowledging the hard work of his team and the support of the community. He looked out at the faces in the audience, a sea of diverse individuals, a reflection of the community he served. In one of the rows towards the back, seated in a wheelchair, was Rick Harlan. His physical recovery was incomplete, but his presence here was a quiet statement. His face, though still marked by the ordeal, held a new expression, not the old bitterness, but a quiet contemplation. And as he watched Jamal on the podium, a clear sense of pride in the man who now led the force. His eyes were fixed on Jamal, following his every movement. The ceremony concluded with applause. People began to mingle, congratulating Captain Carter. As Jamal stepped down from the podium, accepting handshakes and praise, a young officer, clean-cut and earnest, walked by where Harlan was sitting. He paused, noticing Harlan's gaze still directed at Jamal. Young officer, voice friendly, respectful lieutenant, Officer Harlan. What a day, huh? Captain Carter's something else. You should stand and salute him. He deserves it. Harlan looked at the young officer, then back at Jamal, who was now closer, making his way through the crowd. Harlan nodded slowly. He placed his hands on the wheels of his chair, then gripped the armrests, his knuckles turning white with the effort. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. It was a visible struggle, a testament to his lingering injuries, but his resolve was clear. He straightened his back, standing as tall as he could manage. He faced Jamal, who had stopped a few feet away, his expression softening as he saw Harlan standing. Harlan brought his right hand up to his temple. His salute wasn't perhaps as crisp as it once was, the arm slightly shaky, but it was delivered with unwavering sincerity and respect. Harlan, voice low, clear, directed only at Jamal Captain. He held the salute, his eyes meeting Jamal's. This was the final acknowledgement, the fulfillment of a promise made in defiance years ago, now delivered in respect and earned admiration. Jamal stood before him, not as the triumphant victor over a fallen foe, but as a leader receiving the acknowledgement of a fellow officer, one who had finally seen the light. Jamal didn't salute back, protocol didn't require it from his position in this context, and perhaps a simple human gesture was more fitting. He simply looked into Harlan's eyes, a warm, understanding smile spreading across his face. It was a smile that contained the past, acknowledged the present, and offered the silent, profound gift of forgiveness. Jamal Carter's journey, from being mocked and dismissed to standing tall as captain, receiving a salute from the very man who scorned him, is more than a tale of personal ambition realized. It is a powerful narrative about confronting deeply entrenched prejudice not just with anger, but with excellence, resilience, and a steadfast commitment to the ideals that should bind us. It speaks to the capacity for change within individuals, even those whose hearts seem hardened by years of bias and bitterness. Rick Harlan's arc, from antagonist to reluctant ally to a man willing to risk his life and finally offer a gesture of profound respect, reminds us that redemption, though difficult and sometimes costly, is possible. This story teaches us that true justice is not merely punitive. It is transformative. It is found in the courage to stand firm in your truth, the wisdom to choose a different path when one is blocked, and the profound strength required to extend grace, to offer a chance for atonement, even to those who have wronged you deeply. The most meaningful victories are sometimes won not with force, but with character, and the most powerful acknowledgments come not from obligation, but from earned respect, even if delivered one final, difficult salute at a time. It's a reminder that beneath the surface of prejudice and conflict, the potential for understanding and shared humanity always exists. If this story of overcoming adversity, unexpected alliances, and the possibility of change has resonated with you, if you felt the weight of Harlan's final salute or the quiet strength in Captain Carter's smile, we encourage you to reflect on the power of perseverance and forgiveness in your own life. What obstacles have you faced? How have you chosen to overcome them? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences are part of this ongoing human story. And if you were moved by Jamal and Rick's journey, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. We have many more tales of courage, resilience, and the complex tapestry of human experience waiting for you. Join us for the next story, and let's keep exploring the lessons life has to offer together.